audiobook is a very small industry compared to other voiceover, compared to the theater or TV or any of those things. It's very much about meeting people face to face. It's grown a lot since then, but that was very true at the time. Being in New York was a certain advantage to that because there's a lot of publishing here. It really is an outgrowth of publishing and sort of a hybrid with that in the entertainment industry. So just gradually by meeting people and producers and getting an opportunity to work for them and trying to prove myself through the work that I do, just building a list of contacts. And it's like any other small business. You build up or freelancer, you build up a list of clients and you try to do the best work for them. You try to be communicative and as clear with everyone about the work and prompt and all those things that are important about any kind of work that you do.
This is the LitRPG podcast, your one-stop shop for everything LitRPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. Hi everyone, and welcome to the LitRPG podcast, the only podcast that used to be a podcast until it took an arrow to the Neil. With today is Neil Hellegers. This is the best I could come up with. I'm sorry, Neil.
No, that's
really
fine.
Sorry.
It's a Helleger's knee is better than an Achilles ankle
Heel?
tendon.
Achilles
heel of Achilles heel.
Achilles Neil, yeah.
Achilles. in the Greek, it's Achilles.
Yeah, Achilles. But we were just talking in the Patreon content about a lot of different topics. Yeah. Basically, we talked about everything from AI to like the very beginning of your career. But then I said, stop right Neil, there. Stop. We need to talk about this on the main podcast.
This is for everyone. This isn't just for Patreon. Yeah, everyone needs to hear this part.
And yeah, I mean, why don't you just completely start with that? Tell us like how your narrator career got started.
Sure. And first of all, thanks for Max having me here and asking me to come do this. I love we were all the stuff we were just talking about on Patreon. I think is a really important conversations to have too. But in general, I'm happy to be here and I feel like looking forward to a good conversation. So I've been working as a professional actor for, 20 however many years. I'm old. And like many acting careers, it's a lot of happenstance. It's a lot of like, what decisions do you make? Where does that result in getting jobs or then more jobs, which causes you to go in one direction or another. So I spent a lot of time after college and grad school, doing a lot of mostly stage theater. And because of certain employment working for Shakespeare festivals and then working as a teacher for Shakespeare festivals, a lot of that, one big chunk of that was working a lot, performing a lot of Shakespeare, but also teaching it, acting wise or in workshops to various people. And then that kind of moved along into, I live in New York, I live in Brooklyn. And so there's a lot of other kinds of theater here as well too. So whereas on one hand, usually in summers during festivals, I was doing Shakespeare, while I was working with friends of mine who are other theater practitioners and doing weird downtown experimental theater in bars and things like that, as well as some other stuff. That was a lot of fun. There's a great contrast between classical literature and performance and just weird ass shit. I'm sorry, can I curse?
It's a European podcast.
Okay, good. Yeah, right. Cool.
I mean, I think actually, sorry, Jamie, like you probably need to like beep that out because it's in the first 3 minutes of the YouTube video. So
that's how people know that's hardcore.
Minutes,
utilize the beep. Use the beep.
The beep, yeah.
And so, but also at the same time, being in New York, there's a lot of film and TV production here. So I've done a bunch of that as well too. And then a lot of commercial work, a bunch of the TV shows that are here as well too, playing a lot of, as I put it, bearded professionals, lawyers, doctors, things like that, which was all good and was all a lot of fun. And it was a very varied kind of career. And then about 13 years ago, when it was I made decisions about wanting to start a family and things like that with my wife, I was looking for other things to do. And I had always listened to audiobooks and lots of car rides between home and Shakespeare festivals and all the and this is back in the day of the cassettes and then the CDs and the big binders and things that. Yeah. And so I thought, perhaps this is a viable thing. And I did that thing that every narrator does at some point where they hit up another narrator to pick their brain and take them out for coffee, which is a service that a friend of mine did wonderfully for me that I try to return as often as possible to other narrators getting started to do that talk, right? I'm doing one of those later today. For someone. And so that as I said, I'd always been an inveterate reader. Always read mostly, all sorts of different things, but a lot of sci-fi, a lot of fantasy. I think I even tend a little bit more towards sci-fi than to fantasy. But I have a theory that all game lit is actually sci-fi. We can talk about that later. And so it was a natural fit for me to, as a narrator, to make a beeline towards narrating a genre. I should say genre fiction, sci-fi, and fantasy. And the way audiobooks was working then, and to a certain extent how it works now, it's a very similar process. About, you make choices, you see how those bear out, and you continue based on what happens there. It's a choose your own adventure, of course. That I just started making content. It's audiobook is a very small industry compared to other voiceover, compared to the theater or TV or any of those things. It's very much about meeting people face to face. It's grown a lot since then, but that was very true at the time. Being in New York was a certain advantage to that, because there's a lot of publishing here. It really is an outgrowth of publishing, and sort of a hybrid with that in the entertainment industry. So just gradually, by meeting people and producers and getting an opportunity to work for them and trying to prove myself through the work that I do, just building a list of contacts. And it's like any other small business. You build up, or freelancer, you build up a list of clients, and you try to do the best work for them. You try to be communicative and as clear with everyone about the work, and prompt, and all those things that are important about any kind of work that you do. And I just built things up that way to where I am now. And along the way, not too far into it, because I've been working for Tantor, doing a lot of I was at the time I was doing more like urban fantasy. That's where I thought my home was going to be, which I love. And then sort of the urban fantasy has aspects in so many different kinds of, whether it's a game lit or other genre. But I really have a love for the format, like how these sort of cross-cultural applications of urban fantasy compared to high fantasy or something. And because I've been doing that for Tantor, the Michael Anamotoff Perimeter Defense series came into me, and they're like, "This is a genre." Right now this was mostly coming from Russians. Saying about it's operating with game rules. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And I've always been a gamer, always have been gaming, D&D back in the day, and other games, and also for all the different consoles and some PC gaming. And it was like, what? And it kind of like all went off from there. And then once I was doing some game lit, other ones, mostly via Tantor at that point, came my way. That's how I came across Eric Huglin's Good Guys series, and eventually Bad Guys, and then Grim Guys, and who knows what else he comes up with. And then, it was like, by that point, I was like, this is, and again, so we're talking about, this is 2015, 2016, around there, where a lot of the different authors who were now established were really still kind of getting started. And it was a portion of the work that I did, but there wasn't a volume of it to comprise like most of the work that I did. So I've also narrated a lot of nonfiction, literary fiction, poetry. I like to stay kind of versatile, even now, even if like maybe more than half of the titles that I do are game lit. I do love and appreciate doing all sorts of different kinds of books whenever I have the opportunity to do so. Particularly nonfiction, because nonfiction is like, it's like a brain dump in terms. It can be for some kind of fascinating topic written by a person who cared enough about it to write a whole book about it. So that is always a great experience. And because of producers like to, for nonfiction and for a lot of different kinds of books, but particularly for nonfiction, give people books that identify with something to do with their background. And so I always learn something about my own background from publishers who know it and send me nonfiction or historical nonfiction pursuant to my background. So that's always kind of nice. But all along at the same time, as Gamelit has grown, and my working with these authors and for so long, and I mentioned the growing friendships and the sort of involvement, which I'm happy to be kind of a witness to, and to some extent a participant, just in terms of like being involved in some of the series that I narrate, has been really great, and it's been really fantastic to see it grow, and more opportunity, and the breadth of what is possible from just it being like an isekai to a VR experience or whatever, the ingenuity shown in reinventing that. How is it we're in a world with video game rules every single time? Which is, it's my favorite part about starting a new series. I'm like, so how'd you do it? Oh, did he get summoned by a necromancer? Is that what happened? Or
I
is
got
it,
isekai into a VR pod.
there, boom. I got
There you go,
isekai'd into a medieval necromantic VR pod.
Oh, okay. With a blood cult thing. Also aliens.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. You
Okay.
got to involve aliens too. Yes.
Gotta have aliens. Okay.
Well, cosmic horror, you got to do some degree of cosmic horror. Something eldritch has to at some point. Something must be eldritch.
So just write this down.
Actually, early on when I was looking for other books to do, in order just to keep busy, is when I narrated a bunch of more or less public domain H.P. Lovecraft, which there's a lot of ethical quandaries with H.P. Lovecraft, of course.
Oh yeah,
a fair amount of it. But I'm that person who I've narrated Call of Cthulhu twice. He said
John stops.
That's what he wrote it out phonetically at some point and said it should be a word that sounds unnatural in a human, like it's not a word that humans were meant to say. And he wrote it out phonetically with the kind of, and describes the vocal quality of it, and it's like okay, so that's what you do, right? It's Cthulhu.
So it's some sort of like laryngeal contraction,
yes,
like, with a glottal stop in it. Okay,
and so.
The cool part about it, sorry, but I'm really geeking out about it. It's like the cool part is it almost sounds like a drowning.
Yeah.
Right?
In the oceans, as the city of Relia is emerging from its slumber. But in the story itself, he actually details that at one point he sees it written out. The narrator of the story sees it written out, and that's when he thinks it is Cthulhu. But then later on, they hear recordings from one of the tribes that when they're investigating the Little Plinth, that says, no, actually it sounds more like this. So it's written into the story that it has that the way it sounds is different than what you might initially think it is. So I'm it's in the credit, it's funny to see people like, why is he pronouncing it like that? I'm like, and that's actually the correct way to do it. But anyway, but like I said, H.P. Lovecraft is really fraught with a lot of difficulty in terms of him being, he's, we don't need to make a whole necessary podcast about H.P. Lovecraft. We can do that separately.
We can do that, yeah.
We could do that, but also, I mean, because I think it's good to also kind of embrace the difficulty with Lovecraft in terms of what just a misogynist. I think he hated everyone and everything, and included in that is his bigotry and racism for sure. But I think he hated probably himself more than he hated humanity. I think that's what it comes down to. He just saw this as being terrible, insignificant, and awful people, and he just kind of like lived in that experience for a while. But it's interesting to see how much love. I mean, that influence is indelible. I joke about Eldritch, but it comes up all the time. That idea of the alien astronaut cosmic horror is so pervasive in so much gamelit. Or the insignificance of humanity is such a common theme that it's like we have to talk about Lovecraft in a way in order to understand how it's become part of the tapestry of our current literature culture.
I mean, the idea of like something like extra, like something that is extraterrestrial, like that is not of our world, that is so powerful that like it has to originate somewhere else because it transcends the limits of our own power.
Yeah.
And then facing that is absolutely in LitRPG in so many different ways. Whether it's like, it's an alien game show, we need to blow it up. Shout outs to Matt Dinneman. Or it is like, we are but pawns of these uncaring gods. Shout outs to Here Five of Monsters, which is a very elder at some points. I mean, I think it's even in some of Eric's works, but I don't want to spoil anything.
I think in the sense, in the theme, and you see this in a few where the people, the main character or whomever, the population, are at the mercy of gods who are operating on a different moral plane, is a common one. And you see that in Voldran and the gods of Voldrani in terms of that, because that's a game. That is also like the details are intentionally vague because Mr. Ball can't tell Montana or whoever about what the real specifics are. Maybe we'll learn at some point. I don't even know those things. But what I enjoy is when it's the incomprehensibility and this is very Lovecraft. A series that I just recorded the last one for, one of my very favorites, Outcast Another World by Kamikaze Potato. In
I
that,
just saw that on your homepage. Yeah.
yeah, in that, the gods and they have like a dark counterpart that are this is sort of a lot of the conflict in the series. They have it's even to be in their presence is oppressive. The main character has to develop a skill called Almighty Resistance in order to manage it. I just recorded the last book of that series, and it's one of, like I said, it's one of my favorites. It's really really well written, but he includes this idea that the gods, the problem is the gods are completely outside the paradigm of human understanding. And they relate to it because they have their interests in what humanity and other races and associated kind of populations do that they control for resources as much as anything else. But the true alienness of it has to do with the distance between the way they understand moment to moment, how they exist in time, is so anathema and so different and so at cross purposes with humanity that it's like, why'd you even bother making a human, bro? You know?
Have you? I mean, like, why does a human make anything? Right? I think it's a quote from the freaking Bible, right? Does the clay asketh its maker, what makest thou? Right? Like, I'm not a very religious person.
Yeah. No.
What the fuck are you doing, bro?
The clay of life is a thing that features.
Could you imagine like throwing some clay and the clay is like, what the fuck are you doing, bro?
Beep.
But yeah. So I just had a really good question. I almost forgot it. Right, and it's about ending series because you mentioned like several times that you've been ending series.
Yeah.
What's that like for you?
It's emotional, you know. It's like you know, every series. It's not that many of them. Most of them are really kind of ongoing. But like Outcast just finished. I finished Dragon Sorcerer, Sean Oswald recently as well too. That wrapped up. I finished series with Harmon Cooper. It's, you know, I appreciate when people sort of keep things more open-ended, or they just have an infinite amount of sort of material to draw from that they want to just kind of keep going. And I think that's life, right? That's a different kind of experience. But to bring things to an end where enough questions are answered to be satisfying, but also still leave the idea that things are still going. 10 Realms is like this too. He finishes it, but there is always like, it's not that the door is open to them writing more books. It's just that, you know, that these people's lives will continue and to be interesting, that they're not like just done doing stuff. But they'll continue to be doing things, and you're okay not necessarily seeing them. But it's also like, Outcast is a good example where he's been away from home, and the last scene, I'm not going to spoil it, has a real emotional kind of conclusion to it. And it's impossible after, you know, those books are like 20 hours each, and there's been 7 of them. So I've spent like, you know, over 120 hours with these characters and inhabiting them. A lot of acting and is a skill that I try to bring into my audiobook is that the immediate availability of emotional response. And in terms of how that leads to me to make an acting choice in the moment that I don't necessarily have planned, and because I'm allowing my emotional instincts to be as much of a driver as my sort of intellectual structuring that I do of the story during my prep. Those two things work in concert together, ideally. And so when it's been that long and there's the conclusion happening has an emotional fulfillment to it, I let that in, and it's wonderful to be able to do so, to have that concluding moment be something that has that resonance of story and narrative and emotion, so that it puts the button on it so that we can all move on with our lives, you know, knowing that fulfillment exists and will always exist, and regardless of next week there's another actual final boss. We may never see it, but we know that they'll be okay.
Yeah. So I'm like a quote unquote classically trained writer, but that means I went to college and never earned a single cent. But I always like the books that have like an end to their arc, where the character at the end does finish, or you don't jump the shark, right? But I mean, like, there's other books, and I mean this in a very positive way. Like, for example, Primal Hunter that made shark jumping like an Olympic discipline. Like, it is. I think Zogarth on the podcast even said at some point, Jake is going to shoot an arrow through the sun, and it's going to explode, and there's going to be an even bigger and more evil son behind it, right? So I've recently started to like think along this way for like another series that I'm like kind of like plotting in the back of my head, because apparently I'm a workaholic and 4 jobs isn't enough.
Never enough.
Never. And I thought about, hey, what if I could really like have this like really OP main character, and like it's like, oh, once all the skills have been learned, there's bloodlines, and once the bloodline is done, we have ascensions, and like so on and so forth. It doesn't really interest me all that much, because I don't want to write for the system itself.
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather write a story where the system means something beyond the stats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where the stats like tell you something about yourself and you need to decipher it, and then by growing yourself as a person, you can change.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I enjoy. But or like struggling, like Benjamin Carré, perchance.
Yeah. I just actually I met him in person at JordanCon a few months ago, and hung out with him a bunch there. Great guy.
Yeah. And I mean, at some point, he's even going to finish his 3rd book in one of his many series, right?
That was a running. That was a running thing at JordanCon about that. But meanwhile, he's also talking about like writing a 60-hour book next year as well too. And I was like, oh, that's books 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5 for most people. You realize this, right?
Yeah.
But it's just labels. It's just parsing in the end. Anyway,
The joke was like, I was like, hey, has this been your first time at JordanCon? He's like, yeah. I'm like, that's cool. So you could go one more time, because you can't go 3 times. But yeah, so come back to the point. Then I kind of want to like jump back into it where you were. Mm-hmm. He has this thing where the system does something to you, and your humanity is influenced by that. Right, sure. Whether it's the vampire Vincent, where the system is like, hey, like you got like demonic parasites in your blood now, and basically you are no longer able to like have emotions. How do you deal with that if you still like love your family? Or in reincarnated as a farmer is another thing where, hey, how do you deal with the fact that there are people whose charisma stat is so high that if you see them, you fall in love with them, and you're like basically a gimp for the next like 5 days. Right. So how do you do that? What does it do to a society, mm-hmm. right, where these things exist? And I think that's very interesting. That's something I want to write, because I think stories ultimately are not about numbers. I know. Sorry about the heresy. Very sorry.
I've never been a math person, despite the fact of finding a home in a stat-driven genre. But yes. Yeah. Well, I think that Outcast from Another World has one of the skills that you only acquire the skill after experiencing a certain high degree of trauma. A lot of Outcast is about trauma. Actually, it's about how we process it. The skill is called melancholy resistance, and it's usually like he discovers it and turns it on because it seems like a good idea at the time, but it completely detaches him from his humanity essentially, and makes him but leaves everything else, leaves all the ability, which makes him to a very terrible person. And he thankfully is able to shut it off before it gets out of hand. There's a few other things kind of like that in terms of skills that aren't about like an ability to do something like an attack move or something, but are about one's disposition. Like how do you process things? And so whatever I try to keep in mind about just the function of narrating stat screens is that it's unless it's specified that it's from a system voice that's reading it to them, or like a notification that specifically is a voice, like I guess like DCC does, right? I'm always reading it from the perspective of the main character, literally seeing the prompt floating in front of them and reading about themselves. And
like strength.
I mean, like what's my constitution? 25. Is that good? Is that bad? Like that dialogue is happening, and in terms of it being an act of discovery, of revelation, of understanding, of strategy, all those different things. I try to put into that info dump as much as possible, so that it's about the character. And so therefore the system, which is generating those prompts, those notifications, those pop-ups, it's the system operating as a function of character, not just. It is also a info dump, and it is also about the story and about development and the progression of all it too. But if it's not rooted in something that has to do with that person's emotional point of view or intellectual point of view, it's far less interesting. And I think that's where it gets to be like people can just kind of gloss over it or just want to skip it. Even though that's been a really interesting trend to see about people putting their stat dumps in a separate chapter and literally saying in the beginning, feel free to skip and move on to chapter 12. So that people can, if they're not into the crunchy, that they can move right on. And that's fine too. Everyone's experience should be what they want.
It's interesting how so many different people do the stats completely different, because I mean, I've had some people on, right? So Heath does a very, very like ordered, right? So does this. I hear from what you're saying is that you're doing it a little bit more like Jonathan McLean, because Jonathan McLean, he never reads the same stat sheet twice the same way. He always goes like strength 35, agility 14. Like it is very engaging the way he does it. And yes, I'm still like glaring at you, Miles, for adding like your 6-minute friggin' stat sheets into the book. Like, but as you do, they are added into the chapter, like chapter 0.5, for example. You can skip the chapter.
Yeah.
Then you got
I remember everyone should. I mean, also like every book should have a different approach to it. My tendency to make it that is to make it be it's the character reading them aloud to themselves and processing it in real time.
I think that's cool.
It just means that process is going to be as different from book to book and character to character, even if my approach of engagement remains the same. And you know, every rule has exceptions, of course, and sometimes it is just that like they don't care, or they're just, you know, as often as not, characters are dismissing their prompts without reading them anyway. So, but also it's that like, and this happens with Montana a bunch, where if it's like he kills 5 goblins and then it's the 5 notifications in a row. By the 5th one, he's got to be like, all right. Like it's in the text, so I have to read it. But it's exasperating to have to read the 5 notifications in a row, you know. But that's a real that gives character to Montana as being that dude. And that makes him more of a real person than just reading it in the same exact tone of voice. There's another character who would be like, yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, perfect. I wanted to get those 5, and you can add some storytelling into the prompts by doing it that way. But that's a different character. And I mean, maybe Clyde would do that way or something like that, you know.
Yeah, those would be kind of like the characters who have like body pillows of Excel sheets, you know, something like that. I'll totally get it. Like I once had a wonderful narrator reach out to me, like Jess Moran. I don't know if you know her.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, she's great.
She's awesome, isn't she?
Yeah.
Is she? And she narrated one of the many first chapters I wrote for my own book. And I kind of like set this to like, I made the voice like a little robotic, and like she does a great job at assistant narration. I gotta say, like really great job. And then with a little bit of additional like reverb and so on and so forth. Like it sounded really, really good. It was just too much. Like that's on me. Like that's my part, right? So I couldn't mix it the right way. But I do love, and this is the point I was getting to, how there's so many different approaches to this, because it sounds so simple. It's a stat sheet. Read the stat sheet. But you alone have a different approach for each different character. And then there's like so many different narrators out there who do it in a different way. I really appreciate that. And that, I think, is one of the core hallmarks of LitRPG in general.
Yeah. I mean, because aside from that, it's aside from the inclusion of the stat sheets and pop-up and notifications, it's, or at least my core task as a narrator is no different than maybe another sci-fi book or literary fiction. It's still people going through experiences. Like, if you're isekai'd into a fantasy world, you may have part of your brain being like, I've just been transplanted into this fantasy world and I need to learn how to navigate it. And so the characters often do think of themselves like, oh, I'm in a game world. I get it. Oh, well, maybe I can stack my buffs or something. They start thinking, if they happen to know games, they think that way. Most often, someone who's in a fantasy world doesn't think I'm living in a fantasy world. They just are. They just live in the world. That's just where they live, you know. Isekai, again,
I think
makes
about
it a
this
little
myself.
bit
I think to myself the entire time I'm living in a sci-fi dystopia, but that's a different topic,
sure.
I think.
We are increasingly, right? You know, and where's the post part of the apocalypse, right? When is that? When do we get to that? What's the line between, you know, will we know? Probably not. But the stat sheets, it becomes the thing that is the defining characteristic from a writing perspective and a world building perspective for the authors, but for the narrators, it is this particularly kind of distinct skill that you need to develop or make choices about based on that system, that world, that character, that author, and try to fill out. My point before is that I think there are probably a couple of exceptions to this, but even in a world is like as high fantasy as it gets, there are elves and dwarves, and and the dwarves are Scottish and the elves are English. That where could be as like by the numbers as fantasy would be. The moment a screen pops up in front of their face and is floating in the air and says strength plus 10, that's a sci-fi framing, even if it's happening in a fantasy world, like a video game that takes place in a like Elden Ring is an example. Like like you're playing and you want to take down Moog or whatever, and there's nothing very sci-fi about Moog. However, you're like, the system by which I am powering up to get more FP in mind is a numerical system that happens with numbers floating in front of me. That is as sci-fi as it gets. Even if it is completely a fantasy Elden Ring from software environment.
Exactly, and I think what you're hitting on is like a very important point, because in Elden Ring the character doesn't know he has a stat sheet. The stat sheet is there for you because you cannot feel the character, you cannot feel him getting stronger or smarter or whatever, right? So in a lit RPG, having this something that usually you would just write as like I felt stronger, but having a numerical value to it, that makes lit RPG, right? And it's not always fantasy either. Like you can have that in like sci-fi as well. You can have it in cozy. I mean, famously, system offline superfluous information reduced, like that sort of stuff. And I feel as though, for example, like imagine a game. You just gave me an idea. Imagine a game where you were in somewhere like Elden Ring. Like, what would a lit RPG game even look like? And it would look as in a way that the UI is not on your screen, but in front of the character, right? So the UI will be integrated into the world. And I think that could be fucking rad. And now I just need about like 15 million.
Yeah.
And a good UI designer.
You heard it here first, people. Get on the Kickstarter. But I see that this is a corollary to the... Sorry, go ahead.
I need to say this real quick before people like get the wrong impression. Our first game is not going to be our first game.
There's another Kickstarter already in place. I shouldn't even know.
Small indie studio, by the way, right? So we do not have a budget. We're not doing 3D. We're doing a really, really kick-ass 2D, 2.5D pixel, HD 2D, whatever you want to call it, like that sort of shit. You'll see soon, I promise. Sorry, Neil. Thank you for listening to myself.
No problem. I see that whole thing as a bit of a spectrum. It's a corollary to the sufficiently advanced magic and / technology, it being indistinguishable and all that.
Nice shout out.
It's that, like, sure, there could be magical means by which a notification is generated and is floating in text in front of the air in front of them, and maybe it's not technology, but isn't really magic system technology? Isn't using runes a form of coding? I see all these interrelations between sci-fi and fantasy, and in terms of how that how technology is operated, how magic is operated, and all of the sort of similarities or overlaps or thematic connections at the very least between them, such that it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like, it's for marketing purposes, it's good to say this is sci-fi or this is fantasy. But gamelit really, for me, represents the how that spectrum represented all the time, in terms of it being whether it's the rare sci-fi grounded gamelit, which is always great, or whether there's like Magitech involved, where it's another series that I'm in the midst of, Luke Chmelenko's Starbreaker. Which is
you're doing that?
Yeah.
Ooh,
I just finished doing book 3, and there may be more. You didn't hear it for. That is like there's elves and dwarves, but it's more or less in space. But the spacecraft are operated through means of magic, and there is it's on the less crunchy side in terms of its gamelit elements, and is more progression fantasy than anything else. But I mention it in terms of like it is a really great kind of hybridization of sci-fi elements and fantasy elements, all kind of all rolled together into one, in a way that there's less in terms of prompts and things like that, in terms of that degree of sci-fi inclusion, like I was mentioning before. But so much of gamelit is really both those things together. So, and being a fan of both of those, though, like I said, I think I've always in my reading, I've read a lot of fantasy, but when I pick up a book, when I reach for something, it's usually more sci-fi than fantasy, contemporary wise.
Can a team of has-been teen idols save the world? Find out in the new series Boy Bands and Dragons. When Neverboyland is sucked into a magical world, their reunion takes a back seat to staying alive. But if they can get over the past drama that drove them apart, they may find that even pop stars can be heroes. Come and discover your new favorite read, Our Comeback Tour is Slaying Monsters, the first in the Boy Bands and Dragons series by Kim Smuga Otto, dropping on Kindle Unlimited, October 25th.
I love science fantasy. I love where the two things meet, right? And I think a lot of LitRPG readers do too, even though they don't admit it. But I mean, I know as an author, as an agent, as anyone else, like there are so few novels that actually are a sci-fi hit. Like, not counting Luke's books, how many like breakout hits of like real like hard ass sci-fi do you
in game
know
lit, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Asking
it depends.
for a friend.
Right. Ones that's there. I don't think there are any that are pure sci-fi. Because there might be key involved or mana or something like that at some level of it that sort of drives skill abilities, even if they're like marksmanship. 10 Realms is a good example where there's a lot of sci-fi elements, but there's a lot of fantasy elements as well too. But a lot of the it's a bit more like Magitech, like the dungeon cores power the ships, but you have to have a dungeon in order to have a dungeon core, and that's not explicitly, that's obviously far more in the realm of fantasy than sci-fi. I think, well, and again, if we want to say they're all sci-fi, then they're all sci-fi breakout hits. But they're not taking place in a gleaming modern environment or a dirty modern environment, where it's ship based and the concerns are more about Space Empire. Even though perimeter defense is very sci-fi. There is mana involved, and there's magical skills and psionics and things like that are involved. But that is largely about space conquest and about interplanetary relations and things like that.
I would maybe consider Path of Ascension, but like the Path of Ascension like somehow manages to not be sci-fi while being sci-fi.
Yeah.
Right? It is literally like, yeah, sure, it's sci-fi, but there's a tavern. Like it's a favorite kind of sci-fi, by the way, like where it is like literally like the have you watched Nimona by chance?
Is that the shapeshifter? Yes, I have. Yeah.
The aesthetic of that, like hey, like it's knights, but they have like hovercraft. Like I love that stuff. But that would be one, maybe. Cyber Dreams and Stray Cat Strut are two. So female-led cyberpunk. For some reason, it's never male-led cyberpunk.
Don Chapman series, Don Chapman series, which I narrated the first few of the seasons. Those are, I mean, that's very sci-fi. Again, there's fantasy elements or magic elements and things like that in terms of the progression aspect of it, but that is a devotedly sci-fi world. That's the thing. That's the sci-fi that I read a lot. Like Alastair Reynolds as an example of contemporary sci-fi. There's nothing in there that is fantasy applicable. It's all tech. It's all synth. It's all downloading your brain. I think another example, like Ian Banks, the culture novels, is another. Like there's no magic involved in that world as far if I recall.
Ian Banks still?
No,
he's Ian Banks still?
No, I think he passed away a few years ago. Yeah.
No. I mean, like, is he still like LitRPG? I mean, or
no? Well, they're just talking about making a TV show based on the culture novels. But I mean, I think there's Player of Games. That's one. I think the second or third book of the culture novels that has a lot to do with gameplay. But that's like literally people playing games as part of the machinations of the storyline of it. But I'm just talking about them in terms of like more or less contemporary sci-fi that doesn't have a shred of fantasy in it. Alistair Reynolds is his background is like pure hard science, and so even though it's like not quite Peter Hamilton levels of incomprehensible tech, it's still pretty much still very rooted in like an aesthetic that's very like relatable. The Mars trilogy, what's his name, Kim, I'm blanking on the last name. That's like as much geology or areology, because it's Mars, as anything else, but no magic. So much. If the sci-fi in Gamelit, I haven't seen pure. I can't think of an example, and it could very well exist, but I can't think of an example of in Gamelit of a sci-fi grounded series or world or system that doesn't have some lean into key mana, some sort of ephemeral source of power or energy that feeds into the progression of the main character. Again, it could exist, but it would have to be like maybe in a mech sense, like the progression is only about how the mech progresses. And so your eyebrows are moving a lot.
Yes. I got a seizure. No, it's in one of my novels, like at some point, like there's definitely going to be like mech cultivation. It makes so much sense, right?
Yeah.
If you like, if you consider like the core of yourself, like the key core, why not just make your meridians like basically energy channels and improve those with nanites or whatever, and then you have your you have your core, which is like literally like a fusion core, right? So
Dawn does that a lot.
It makes so much sense.
There's a lot of mech progression in the seasons series that Dawn writes, and that has to do with like upgrading the mech in terms of like as surely as you're upgrading skills, you're upgrading armaments and things like that.
Oh yeah. Okay, I remember what. Yeah, Space Seasons. Yeah. Dawn is one of the like crazy people who actually like write sci-fi. Also like under a pen name, she does that a bunch of times. So it's she's really into it. And I'm very happy to say that she recently, I don't know which one, but she got picked up on a competition for one of her stuff.
Yeah, really cool. I saw that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, damn, we went through so many of my questions by talking about it.
Organic.
Now, God damn it. No, sci-fi. We talked about this.
Yeah.
No organics allowed. I want to kind of ask you about what's a book that you've narrated that you feel people should listen to more?
Scarlet Citadel by Jack Fields.
Oh,
and then Scarlet Blade.
That one,
that series is so good. I narrated that in dual and duet with Tess Irondale. We did some parts of it as live duet, and some parts of it is just as what we call dead duet, where we record separately and then Podium pieces it together. I have a lot of series that I say like are a favorite series, and I don't order them in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. There's like a grouping of them, and a lot of those get a lot of love, and so I don't necessarily feel the need to lean into them too heavy. But I really love people to listen to book 1 and 2. They're already done. They're out. We're doing the third one, recording it in September. The book is already out, so you can read all the 3 of them. Jack has created an incredible world. It has an approach to the style of writing that is wholly unique in its own way, not just within the genre. And they are a pleasure to narrate and to occupy there. It's great to work with Tess. We come from similar acting pedigree backgrounds, and just really kind of clicked, and just both feel exactly the same way about how much we love working on that series and inhabiting those characters and that language. It's funny and weird and harsh and all these great things. And so that's my answer to that is the Walking Shadow is the name of the trilogy, and the first book is Scarlet Citadel.
The third book comes out on the 11th of July.
Oh, it hasn't actually come out. It was turned into the publishers, but I wasn't aware that it wasn't out yet.
Yeah. One thing I think that like I think it's a Legion book, right?
Yes.
Because I believe that like the first 2, like the first cover is like the most like
that's that cover. Yeah. The cover is astonishing.
I wish they would have had like gone for the other two with the same style, because like now it's a bit like out of whack. But that's so small of a criticism, because it's a really really good book. If you're anything like me, who likes to pretend the intellectual, and made the grave mistake of having an English degree. That's the kind of stuff that maybe you would like. Not that you have to have one English degree to like it, but that book only having 32 ratings is a criminal. It's really really good.
It falls in the category of one never knows, and also the day ain't over yet. In terms of what it does, and in many ways, that it exists is a wonderful thing, and that Jack has created something truly special, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to plug it here, and I can't recording the next book can't come soon enough, even though that's in September. So there's a whole season between now. There's a whole summer between it. But yeah, it's truly a pleasure.
But you say, no, I think you were just finished when talking about like your collaboration with Tess when I interrupted you. But do you in general enjoy working on a duet or dual narration?
Yeah. Well, so much. I mean, the most of the time, majority of the time, it's just me in the box, right? In this box, and I do try to think of that as a collaboration as much as possible. It is a collaboration with the author, with their work. I'm not alone, and I'm not generating. This is not my work. I'm interpreting someone else's work, and so that's a collaboration that extends to the producer that I'm working with, or if it's the director or whatever. That's always a collaboration as well too. But at the end of the day, and I think writing is a lot like this too. It is one putting in the time alone, solo. So when there is an opportunity to do a duet or dual narration, it's been interesting to see how it's encroached into the industry. Encroaching is kind of a harsh word for it, because it's a good thing. It's for example, it's used so much in romance, which I have a romance pseudonym. I do a little bit of it. It's kind of, it's not volume wise as much as anything else, but it's been interesting to see how the popularity of romance in general as a narrative form, or people really enjoying audiobooks, enjoying how they listen to it in whether it's split POV, whether you have male female chapters and you have different male narrator or mask or femme narrator switching off chapters, or whether it's full duet where all the male voices are done by the mask narrator and the femme narrator as well too. There's been a little of that with Game Lit. The Four Horsemen series I've been doing with Mike Chatfield, with Stephanie Namath Parker. We've been doing that in full. I mean, there's some chapters where the other person doesn't talk, so we record some chapters separately, but most of it is recorded in live duet with each other. And Walking Shadow is another example of that. To be able to have the luxury of bouncing off someone, and to have the technical capability, which didn't always exist, to have us be in our separate booths and be able to do that more or less in real time. Although previously a duet, when people are working live together, was really prohibitive, because you had to literally be in the same studio in order to make it happen. So there's geography involved, there's money involved, and it is still a more expensive. Like it's a lot more labor intensive to even edit together even live duet, much less dead duet where you're plugging lines in back and forth. And so it is an additional ask. And even then, when I'm just recording my lines or even just dialogue, I'm still imagining working off of another human being. So, I mean, we in the other in the Patreon section talked a little more about AI, but that human interaction in the context of the work that I usually do alone in my booth, to have the opportunity to do that is really invigorating and exciting, and it generates choices that I can't plan in advance, because I don't necessarily know what I'm getting from the other actor. And that keeps the work so much more dynamic and interesting and engaging to just do, and hopefully to listen to, obviously, as well. But it's coming up more and more, which has been great to see. And I hope to be able to do more of it, kind of moving on. And it's two people seem to be getting the idea that that's a possibility technologically, and more readily so than in the past. So I hope to see more of it. I hope to do more of it.
It for example, for my stuff, I definitely would. would take that because, there is a lot of there's so much to duet narration that even if you're like a super talented, you just can't replicate that. Going because we only have about 9 minutes left on the main podcast, I kind of want to jump over to another question here.
Sure.
You're going to be at LitRPGcon, right?
I am, yes. Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
it's so
me
soon.
too.
It's happening
it's next month.
Yeah.
I need to get my COVID shot because last year at DragonCon, I spent the entire 5 days with COVID in bed on a couch, actually. So it was
in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I flew in, met Maxime Durand, Matt Shirt, and Draith, and we got my badge, got a headache, passed out on Maxime's couch, woke up with shivering fevers, and then spent the next 5 days getting fed soup by Void Herald, which is not the worst thing ever. But
there are worse fates.
Yeah, it was.
There are worse fates for man.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Even have a photo of Maxima trying an American croissant and making the appropriate face. It's very, very cool.
They're good ones. There are places in my neighborhood that make excellent croissant. But anyway, that's Brooklyn. But yeah. So LitRPGcon.
But as we as Europeans have determined, breakfast croissants are an abomination to mankind. Just saying.
Yeah.
But LitRPGcon. I need to get my COVID shots. I want to do it soon. Promise to myself. But are you also going to be at DragonCon?
I'm a little on the fence about DragonCon. I didn't go last year. I went the previous 2 years. I would like to. I have to. I haven't gotten. I have to get tickets, and I want to. If I am, I saw that the DragonCon price is going up a little bit soon, so I would want to do before that. I'm also waiting to hear on what was great about JordanCon and what's great about LitRPGcon is that it's a real opportunity for engagement and participation and doing active things and panels and things like that. And that's that. If I'm going to make the choice to travel and spend money to do that, those are real. Those add a ton of value and engagement to what I'm doing there. And there's gonna be a lot of that. There was a lot of that JordanCon, a lot of that at GameLit, at LitRPGcon. DragonCon is a bit of a different animal in there, but I'm waiting to see I'm waiting to see what that looks like. I enjoy that as a con, separate from whatever GameLit stuff is happening. I love the layout of the different hotels, all the tons of amazing. I live in New York City, so New York City Comic Con is a great con. But then when it's over, everyone disperses out into the city, and that's fine. And DragonCon, it's like everyone stays in those hotels and travels between, and the cosplay goes on all night. And it's such a wonderful, quirky, I stumbled upon one room in one of the lower levels of one of the hotels that was just playing the movie Excalibur on a continuous loop the entire time, and I'm like, that's great. I just want to sit and I just want to watch, Patrick Stewart
I gotta be honest.
and Excalibur for 20 minutes and then move on to something else,
I was at the I think the West End, and I'm pretty sure I entered the back rooms at some point. There's a bar in the West End where all the authors hang out, and you kind of
base camp for GameLit, you
have to kind of go through one a couple of corridors, snake their way into the bathrooms.
It's not obvious how to get there. You got to get down to it.
And I'm quite sure that that Excalibur movie thing, that's in the back rooms. I'm 100% sure.
Yeah,
10.
Oh no, that was literally something I came across. It was I watched that movie so much as a kid.
Do you know the back rooms? The idea of the back rooms?
What do you mean?
It's internet.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. That kind of backrooms. Yes. Yeah. No, I've been literally one of the small conference rooms off in one of the weird corners of one of the hotels. Sure. That kind of back room. Yeah.
Sure. You've been exchanged by a changeling. You admit it.
Yeah. That's fine. They do a really good job these days with changelings. Full brain scan. Uploads.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a hybrid of sci-fi and fantasy changeling.
Yep.
But I'm also waiting to hear at JordanCon, and I'll be doing this again also at GameLit. I keep saying GameLitCon. It's LitRPGcon. I tend to call it GameLit, and then LitRPG is under the umbrella of of game lit.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic. But I did at JordanCon. Because JordanCon being tied in with Robert Jordan and a bit more fantasy, and last year, not this past year, but the year before that, one of the actors from that show did a Shakespeare workshop. So I'm like, oh, I do Shakespeare workshops, and did like a staging of Act 1, Scene 1 of Romeo and Juliet with a bunch of people. That was an exercise that I used to do a ton as a teaching artist in New York City schools years ago, before in my former life. That I'll be doing at LitRPGcon. And
Cool.
that someone who JordanCon and DragonCon have overlapped in terms of their planners, and also a friend of mine has friends in the Brit Track at which does Shakespeare programming at DragonCon, and so I need to talk to them about the possibility of doing that same workshop in the Brit Track, which would be, like I said, if I'm going to go, I want to be busy in ways aside from just gamelit stuff, and aside from all the other stuff that I love. I would go just to see people and hang out. But in order to make the time out of work, I need to have it be a little bit more, or ideal. I'd like it to be. I don't need it to be. It's not a requirement, but I would prefer it to be that way.
All I do at cons is I grab my laptop because I mean, I always am working in some way, shape, or form. And I go to a place and I hold court. I love that.
Yeah.
Like I like just like hanging out in a place where people pass by that I know, and then kind of like, hey, come on, sit down, let's have a chat.
That's what's great about the Westin at DragonCon. It's just this corner where people go for either breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or late night bar, and you sit in one corner. And I'm never not prepping. I'm always be prepping.
It's prepper. But yeah, it's quite fun. Like I haven't been. I hear good things about panels. I've never been to one. No, because like last year at DragonCon, I was just sick the entire time. And I'm quite sure that I'll be like seeing some panels. But to be honest, after having done 99 of these podcasts, I think there's little I can take out of a panel. I think the concept doesn't really interest me all that much. I mostly want to go and hang out with nerds. And like last year, I thought that was kind of funny. I saw some people like running around like in cosplay with like police gear, right? And their badge on the side said "Thought Police." That was hilarious.
There's so much great cosplay and creative weird stuff that people are, and we have a high volume of it. Like you see all that stuff at other cons, but DragonCon is just so much of it, and it's all concentrated, and everyone passes by each other through the corridors from one hotel to another. About panels, though, not all panels are created equal, and I think that a lot about panels is about engagement with people newer to the content. Who are learning about it for the first time. And I think there's been a progression, certainly with the panels at DragonCon, where the first years where they were involving, they had the Gamelit track, where almost every panel was, what is Gamelit? And then it was the same conversation, more or less, maybe with a slightly different, like a post-apocalyptic twist or a system twist or whatever it might be. That's gotten a lot better. And I think that the best panels are the ones that explore process, that allow the people on the panel to talk about how they do that thing. And so it's not about the thing as much as it is about the creative process that ends up creating different versions of the thing. That is, and so therefore is unique information. That's not just about what is this thing, but how do you get there in such that, like, I learn a lot hearing other people's creative processes and then mixing and matching and stealing things from other people. Like, oh, I'm going to try that, I had a point of view about it, and this person has a different point of view, and their different point of view has edified my own point of view or changed my point of view. That's I think the value, but it takes a good moderator to like have the conversation progress beyond statements and have it be interactive. And or questions from an audience as well too, and there's a skill to that needs to be developed, but but I'm hoping for. I mean, there's going to be all these different panels at LitRPGcon, so we'll see how that goes too. So
we might like I haven't talked to Jeff about this yet. I need to talk to Jeff in Geneva, but we were definitely going to like show something about the game.
Oh, okay.
Because the guys at Dragon Con, no, at Sound Booth, are helping me with the trailer. So it would be like an amazing way of
Well, you mentioned
showcasing
a
that.
few of those narrators that you mentioned are people who work like Gary and Catherine, or like work for SPG a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because like we chose Gary and Catherine because they work on Calamitous Bob. And Calamitous Bob is like the fourth in our little like genre selection of the genre. We have other authors who we are like in talks with, but it's a bit early to like talk about more. But I'm very, very interested in seeing how it goes. I don't think we're gonna have like a keynote. I would have to like bring a turtleneck and say one more thing. That could be fun. But I'm looking forward to just being at the con. I'm going to meet my agent buddy / employer Drew Gilmore for the first time in person because he's Canadian. We're going to meet lots of our clients. We're going to have like a nice dinner. It's going to be really great.
I'm really much looking forward to it. I haven't been to Denver in a really long time. It's a great city. And it's, as much as Jordan Con just in April was a lot of fun. And it was great to see everyone and hang out. But the scale of this is so much wider that it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to it.
How big was Jordan Con?
As cons go, I don't know how many people were in attendance, but like, this was the second year of doing the Gamelit track at Jordan Con. It is compared to like Dragon Con. It's a fraction of a fraction.
Sliver,
But in that sense, that's also the kind of the charm of it because it doesn't have that insane and crowded intensity. You can really spend time with people. Like you can spend quality time, not just being like, "Hey, what's going on? It's really out at the bar," but like really sit down and really have like connective, real conversations with, and not just about the work. I mean, just as like human beings, in a relaxed, low key environment. It's also in Atlanta at a hotel in the sort of north central western section of the city, near a mall. It doesn't feel like it's not an urban kind of place. But it was, like I said, it was really nice. It was a great time. But I'm looking forward to that. The contrast of volume with GameLitCon.
Yeah.
LitRPGcon.
Absolutely. You're always getting it. But yeah, the DragonCon was an experience. Like even without COVID, even with COVID, like Atlanta was an experience. It's been a while since I've been to the States. Like the last time I was in the States for a longer time, I was younger and poor and didn't have like so many other options, but like I didn't know certain things about like not using public transit, like which is insane to me as a European.
No, as a New Yorker, I insist on using the MARTA every time I fly into Atlanta. I always use the subway to get the MARTA to get from the airport to either Peachtree downtown where that is, or up to where Jordan Con was. Like it's so easy.
Absolutely,
why wouldn't you? Why would you pay money for a car when there's a perfectly good transit?
Well, like
MARTA's not amazing. It's no New York City MTA, but it's still there. It's serviceable. It works.
New York subway. I love the New York subway.
Yeah,
it's awesome. With the little furry mascots. Like no, it was good. Like Berlin has the same thing. Like, but that was comparable. The Martha, I've literally heard people getting death threats.
Oh, it's shady. It feels like from someone who rides the New York City subway at all hours of the day. It's still a very different scene from what the MARTA can be at 1 a.m. leaving there and going back to one's hotel. I personally haven't had any problems, but I know that it happens, and
I was happy Draith was with me because Draith is a big muscular man. So yeah,
I thought you said I had a wraith. At first, I really thought you said I had a wraith with me. I'm like, yeah, that would be that would be very helpful to have just glowering, floating by your side. I'm not going to mess with the guy with the. Don't mess with the guy with the wraith.
Draith, he writes the Forerunner. Really cool book.
Yeah.
Okay, but we gotta end it here. At least like the main show part. Neil, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Do you have any last words for our public audience before we head to the Patreon stuff?
Like I said, I'm just consider myself very fortunate to be in this genre, and so thank you to the listener, reader, fan of the genre, who stuck with us to the end of this. And I appreciate you, because without the listeners, like, it doesn't exist, and whenever I'm doing the work that I do in here, it's the listener who I'm thinking of. That's who it's for. It's the story that I'm telling has to have a recipient, and that's you. So thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening and watching as usual. Usually I would tell you to like, subscribe, and so on and so forth. Please do.
It's a reflex at this point.
Yeah, you can still do that.
Yeah.
I am going to probably be talking about the game more on this channel. We're going to have like devlogs and that sort of stuff as soon as like development really picks up. But yeah, you can kind of follow the channel for that. You can also follow for more podcasts. I will have more podcasts with authors at some point, but they are going to be irregular because I just can't commit to doing regular podcasts at this rate any longer. Like, I just can't justify it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a really fun hobby. I've loved doing it, and I think like 100 episodes is just right. Yeah. So I'll see what I can do. Maybe I can find someone for episode 100 that will give this like a really good bang, or I might just leave you on a cliffhanger at 99 until I can get someone who does. We'll see. Maybe at LitRPGcon, I'll just like kidnap Matt Dinneman and go like 5 questions.
Maybe episode 100 is the friends you made along the way.
Oh, maybe. That's a lot of friends.
It's a compilation episode. Like, you get stuck, like in a sitcom, when they get stuck in an elevator and they just do a clip episode of all the previous times where, remember that time where we, and then they show a clip from that episode 2 or whatever.
I mean, like, that's not a terrible idea, but yeah, I want to do something special because I really enjoyed this thing. I really enjoyed doing this. I wouldn't be where I am without this show, and I really enjoy having had this opportunity and meeting all these cool people, including you, Neil.
Including you.
All right, enough of the sentimental bereavement stuff. I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for listening and watching again. And I will see you next time. And if you're on Patreon, then the show goes on once more.